You know, if like two parameters end up blowing up, you're not going to end up going deep into like the code path, and you might not be able to explore all various paths through the application. So, you know, just be smart when you're generating these fuzz cases. You know, just do one at a time. A great module inside the standard library is iter tools. There's various methods in iter tools that let you create like fuzz cases very easily. And this is just some example. Say we have like a list of parameters and just a list of attacks. We could create a Cartesian product using the iter tools product method to then just fuzz every request parameter one by one, instead of throwing everything all at once.
And iter tools is specifically made to be more efficient than your standard for loop, because it's made for iteration, hence iter. So everybody's got that. I know it's early in the morning, but. So PyWebFuzz. I wanted to have a module where I could call things out of, originally I just wanted to implement the FuzzDB and say, you know, I want to be able to call FuzzDB inside of Python and be able to take advantage of all that. Has anybody here ever heard of FuzzDB? Okay, FuzzDB is basically a collection of values. So it's your data files. And so when you're doing SQL injection, it's nice to have a list of, you know, predetermined SQL injection values to test. There's a lot of other things inside of FuzzDB too, like error strings, which are kind of nice, and, you know, exotic encodings and all kinds of things like that. So it's nice to have those inside of your test cases where you can just call them. It started to become like a lot bigger than I intended. So I have the FuzzDB values available. I have request logic that's built into the utils, as well as I took the encoder lib from Dharma encoder and included it here as well. So you could grab any of those encodings and run with them. So I guess I really don't want to pop out of this. Okay, so we're going to have to do it eventually anyway. So just to pop out of this for a second, on the Google code page, there's the wiki, and the only real important thing that you need to see here, and it is the import of like the LDAP values from FuzzDB. Now, I realize that this looks very annoying, but I was trying to map the namespaces as close to FuzzDB as possible, because if you're familiar with FuzzDB, then you know, having to learn new paths and everything else. The only other thing is that anywhere there was a hyphen in FuzzDB, I had to replace it with an underscore. So, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. So another place where you're going to need to write your own tools is where you have complex sequenced operations or state issues. Your vulnerability scanner might not understand how the web page is being laid out. I've seen instances where every single time the page is laid out, you'd have your menu options up there, and underneath those menu options, there's a different random value associated with them every single time the page is laid out. Every single vulnerability scanner, every single tool is going to choke on that, because many of them work by replaying attacks, even if they're updating cookie data and everything else. So home is not the same location every single time you click on it. In that case, you have to maintain your own state, you have to call the content, and when you start building your own tools, you start to take for granted some of the things that other tools or even a browser does for you, such as, you know, appending the referrer onto the request. You know, those are the kinds of things you need to think of when you're building tools from scratch. And of course, if all else fails, you can resort to regular expressions, which
then you got two problems.
So sometimes, you know, it's easier to have the browser do work for you. And there's a couple different browser automation frameworks. Has anybody here ever heard of Selenium? Oh, wow, quite a bit. Okay, cool. Has anybody here ever heard of Windmill? 2 people, I'm actually surprised. So Windmill is basically the Selenium idea with like Firebug Lite and everything built into it, but it's written in Python, which at first I thought was kind of cool until I started using it, and then I didn't like it anymore. It just had some problems with it, and I ended up just going back to Selenium. So, one of the things you can do with Selenium is walk the browser through a particular case or problem. And the IDE will record all the actions for you in your associated programming language, and you can just copy and paste that data into your IDE and make changes as necessary, and then rerun that test case. And Selenium will launch the browser, it'll walk it through everything, and it'll send all your test cases. So there's a couple of different components to Selenium. There's the server, which is basically written in Java, that sits there, listens for the request to come in, and basically runs and launches the browser. The remote control, which is your Python interface, so it'd be selenium.py when you download the code. And then the browser plugin, it's a Firefox plugin. So next slide. It kind of looks like this, and we're actually going to do a demo. So and I hope it's okay to see. But as you can see, you can see Tom Selleck there sporting his mustache. So as you can see, we have a bank website opened up here, and as you can see the Python code on the side. I'll just do the demo. And I'm going to hope that that this is easy enough to see for you. Oh wow, that's not going to be good, is it?
Can you expand it?
Yeah. So that's not good. I can't drive, by the way. So here we're gonna end up testing this bank website. So we're gonna launch our Selenium IDE. It's gonna come up, and then I already had Python selected, but if you go into off the screen, you can see that Python is selected, and I moved it even more off the screen, which is awesome. It's not off the screen any other time. So you might have an operation where you need to click through 3 different things before you log in. On the side there, if it was even remotely visible, you'd see that it's building these actions.
So it's actually generating Python code on the fly.
Yep, it's generating your Python code. So even though our login failed, like our test case fails, right? We have all this code set up here. Inside the Python file here, you copied and pasted it in. I just added a for loop over the top of some attacks. So a semicolon, or a single quote, a semicolon, and then a 1 = 1. So we start the server up, and then we just basically run our Python code. And when we do this, once we run this, it'll actually take care of in the background. It'll start the browser, and it'll run through the actions that we recorded in Python. And of course, I broke into it and added some SQL injection attacks. And for convenience, there is this running, I said there's a function that says get body text. And I figured that was easier than having you strain your eyes to look at a bunch of HTML. So if we scroll up the 3 test cases we did, as you can see in the first one, we see a database error message there. So that's probably not good. The second one looks kind of like the normal website that failed. However, the third one says view account summary. So that's like win. And that did not take any time to do that. So if this bank was a difficult case where we had to click through and take all these actions, it's much faster than clicking through all of them and then adding the data yourself. So this can be very useful. And of course, this didn't even hit the tip of the iceberg with what Selenium can do, obviously, since you guys are familiar with it. How many people knew that you could do this with Python and Selenium? Okay, a few people. Good. And you guys are so in luck because you get to see Tom Selleck again. I just want you to take that in.
So the way I work, basically, when I write tools, I don't try to do any kind of spidering because I think it's too difficult a problem for me to actually just handle myself because I'm not that smart. I'd rather just work off what I already have, and that's from like a burp proxy crawl log. So like as I'm browsing through an application, I'm having like burp record every request and response to just some log. And this log contains like a lot of valuable data that I could then use. So I wrote this API basically, I call it the GDS burp API. Basically I go through and parse an entire burp crawl log, or you could parse a spider log or any kind of log that burp generated, and parse every request and response into a single object. And that each burp object contains the properties of the request and the response, as well as some other metadata that burp recorded. This is just a printout of various values inside like a burp object. A couple things to note, there's like an index property. If you have like burp open, if you look into the history, that index in the burp object is going to match to the number, the index number in your burp history session. You have full access to like the request body, the request headers, request method, response body, and things like that. So why I wrote this was because like using web scanners, Ben and Aggie told this the other day about fuzzers. Everyone writes their own fuzzers because everybody else's fuzzer sucks, right? You know, that's why I write my own scanners, because I don't work the way some other people work. So these web scanners, from my opinion, never provide enough context to the requests and the responses that I want. They try to do too much for me, but not as much as I want them to. So basically, we could take this API and just build our own smart fuzzers or scanners on top of it. So what can we do with the API? One of the things that I like to do is, say you take 2 user sessions. Say one person's like a user and the other person's like an administrator. What we could do is we could parse those 2 separate proxy logs, compare all the URLs that were accessed, all the parameters that were submitted to with each request, and do a comparison. And what you'll find is probably the administrator probably has a lot more access to various URLs and parameters that get submitted. So what we could do then is just take that burp object and just replay it as a normal user. Things like inspecting responses, comparing content length of responses is real simple. Another nice thing that I came across while writing this API is basically I can pull out from my parsed list of requests and responses individual requests to replay. So say you have some cart checkout operation that may take 5, 6, 7 requests. I could pick those out and replay them in order and fuzz them along the way, submit requests out of order and see what happens. So it's a lot, I think it's pretty powerful.
Also login too, like a login sequence.
Yeah, so like a login sequence as well is perfect. And just replaying a request with HTTP-lib2 is as simple as these literally like 3 lines of code. So another nice thing is inside the Python standard library, there's a module called difflib. What we could do is we can now compare, we can output a diff comparison of 2 responses and easily identify the differences in the HTML so we could visually see what has changed in a response. So I got a demo for this, just showing it off.
So we're going to assume the same problem is happening, so I'll drive.
Do you want to zoom out?
Yeah.
Like, zoom out in the video.
I can't zoom out anymore.
I mean, zoom out, not zoom in.
I can't zoom out anymore. It's on the screen.
Can you right click?
So, you know what? You're just doing this page anyways.
No, I'm not. It's the other side.
Oh, it's the other side you want.
Yeah, so basically